Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhammam Sangham Namasami. Dear friends, in the published schedule, we had indicated some Dhamma talk followed by guided meditation and then a group discussion. I propose to switch it around by having a Dhamma talk and a group discussion followed by meditation. And then the meditation can merge into your individual practice for the following period of time. And I'll also mention something that's very funny. When we were doing the chanting of the puja together, the Zoom kept asking, is this music? Would you like us to switch over to whatever the app is for music? But when I'm chanting by myself, it doesn't recognize it as music. I used to have a much more beautiful musical voice when I was younger, but time goes by and things fall apart, and the voice gets kind of more creaky and croaky. And I'm sorry if it's less beautiful. But I hope that the Dhamma that I speak of will reach to your heart, even though it might be coming out in a creaky old voice. I'm going to speak to you about the second of the three taints, or the three asavas. This one is called Bhavasava, or the taint of Okay. So I'm going to speak today about the second of the three asavas, or the three taints, the three defilements. This is called Bhavasava, or the taint of existence, the taint of becoming. In one place I saw it translated as the intoxication of existence, which I like very much. Bhava is one of the points on the 12 steps of dependent origination, and it means to become something. So based on how you lived your life and what you were clinging to and what you were craving after, then you will become something, and that determines your birth into some realm of existence. So you could become a human, an animal, a god, a ghost, or a being in the hell realm. If a person is practicing a meditation on the Brahma Viharas or on loving kindness, those are called the divine abidings. They could lead to being reborn in heaven. They, 4 jhanas are described as fine material practices. And so then one would be reborn in a fine material heavenly realm. So the cosmology is a reflection of the state of mind that a person develops. A similar Pali word is called bhavana, which is meant the mental cultivation of the meditation part of the path. Some of us got our original training at the Bhavana Society. So that's the place that's dedicated to the meditation practice, mental cultivation. So you're cultivating a certain state of mind. If you cultivate a mind of war and conflict, it's just like you're in hell right now, and you can be reborn in hell. If you cultivate the mind of an animal, just following your animal instinct, then you can be reborn in an animal realm, and so on like that. I consider the traditional explanation of this bhavasava, the taint of being or becoming, is a desire for rebirth in heaven. There's a different way of looking at it that's a little bit my own idea. It's not what I've seen in the traditional views. But I think that even during this lifetime that we're in now, that same kind of desire to be somewhere, it's like a desire to get a job, to get a position, to get a status, and then we don't have to worry because we will have landed. So we landed the job. So I got married. I'm a married person. And now I don't have to worry about it, social insecurity anymore because my marriage is going to last forever. But it could seem that way. Or if I unconsciously feel myself to have a certain position or a certain status in this lifetime. Like I'm an American, I'm white, so I've got my American white privilege, and I might be completely unaware of what all that entails. I just carry it around as my safety zone, and then eventually maybe like truly shocked to find out that that's not really true. In fact, it happened to me when I became a monastic. And I found out that within Theravada Buddhism, women are second-class citizens. And I had never been treated as a second-class citizen within my family. And so this kind of clinging to status, clinging to a position, clinging to an identity is a really different kind of energy that keeps us trapped in the round of samsara, on the rat race, going around and around. And so many different kinds of conflict and stress here in this world come about because of our worry and obsession about having a safe position in life. There's a teaching about, this appears in the Sutta Nipata, that the wise sage is not concerned about being better than, worse than, or equal to others. Right? So if someone has an inferiority complex, they've got some kind of an idea of a self. They might not be clear that they have it, but they think that that self is like dirty or sinful or low or wrong in some way. How much suffering in that? Or else they have an idea of that the self is either superior, like having a pride, conceit, and so forth, thinking themselves to be intelligent, thinking themselves to be more accomplished than others, and thinking that one deserves to have certain things coming easily, like it would be some kind of a mistake if an intelligent person like that would fall into a disaster. Then you want to sue because it's not supposed to happen to me. So those, I believe that anytime we are suffering, if we might, when we do that review, see that we're clinging to some kind of identity like that, and we could identify that as being related to this bhavasava, this taint of existence, and realize that there are realms that we exist in. So people, that's a reality. There is a heaven, there is a hell, there is an earth, there is an animal realm, and so one can exist in a certain situation, but that doesn't define us. It doesn't give us any kind of safety, and it's not a permanent thing. It's not something that we would be able to protect ourselves by clinging to that. This traditional explanation of bhavasava as the desire for rebirth in heaven is kind of connected to it's sort of like a proceeding up the ladder. When someone is living in Khīnāsava, or being caught up with the taint of sensuality, aiming for being reborn in the sensual sphere, either as a human or as an animal, and subjected to those, I guess you could say lower, more basic drives, then if you are able to escape the gravitational pull of the senses and get to this mental plane of experience that is apart from the senses, you could get there in meditation. A lot of times, the way that I teach meditation, you start by being very well situated in the body, being aware of the physical body, like the weight, and then being aware of the sense contacts and what's arising based on the sense contacts. But then there are then the further forms of meditation when this clear and sharp awareness of the sensory contacts in the material body is like too much of a burden. The mind is like tired of that, and the mind is like very stable, and the mind may withdraw itself from being focused on sense contact and only be focused on the mind only, the state of mind, or only focused on the breath becomes like a concept of breath. It's not that we're, always staying forever on the sensation of breath, but it just like there's just breath. It's more abstracted. And when we can, in meditation, withdraw our awareness from the 5 physical senses, then it can be extremely pleasant because all of the aches and pains would disappear. And actually, this is something that's recommended for a person who has chronic pain, if they would learn how to develop samadhi, develop concentration, that they could then take to their mind to a space that would be away from aches and pains and have a bit of a respite from that. Now, a person who's got the wrong view about the self could make a mistake and think that this extremely peaceful, blissful, and stable state of meditation means that they have gotten in touch with their eternal self. And because of that wrong view, this is this is leading forward to the third one of the asavas, which is the asava of ignorance. Because of having that wrong view or that wrong assumption, that wrong idea about an eternal self, then you miss the chance to notice your meditation state in reality exactly as it is. And instead, meditation is so peaceful, so stable, so wonderful, then one can start clinging to that. And a person who's a good meditator can cling to their meditation. It could be even that it might be psychologically negative to them to be like running away from life into meditation. That's a possibility. Or it could be that they will just go there again and again with the thinking that this is like their key to the entryway to eternal happiness. So it's that wrong idea has blocked them from a chance to discover something else that's really valuable. And the really valuable other thing they could discover, if they were not deluded about it, is even this meditated state is formed by causes and conditions. Like we learned how to meditate, we came to the quiet place, we sat down for meditation, we set our mind in a certain direction. All those are like the causes and conditions that create that experience. And that state is not forever, because sooner or later we've got to come out of it. They say like typically, I think I've heard 8 days would be like the maximum. And then when coming out of it, one might experience the ordinary world as being disappointing because it's not as nice as the meditative experience. Or if you are practicing like that, thinking that this is like your way to eternal heaven is to keep on doing this practice, then at the end of this lifetime, you can be reborn in a heavenly realm, and you can stay there for a long time, like 64,000 eons. And then eventually you use up your, whatever the karma was that brought you to that heavenly realm. And then you could possibly have a chance to be reborn in a human realm and have to, or even an unpleasant realm and have to start all over again. So in that way, heaven is more pleasant than hell for sure. It's a lot more pleasant than the animal realm. They say that the human realm is characterized as having the mixture of pleasant and unpleasant. And it's because of that mixture of pleasant and unpleasant that there's a kind of distinctive chance to develop wisdom from the perspective of the human realm, the human realm of existence. Because when it's all unpleasant, one could be in despair. And when it's all pleasant, one could not have the spiritual urgency. So that's what the taint of becoming is. Either, they mention in particular the residual subtle craving that arises in somebody who's already given up their sensuality, sensual craving and sensual addiction and so forth. They've given all that up and they're practicing meditation, but they still have some minor, subtle amount of clinging left. They're clinging to this pleasant, heavenly space. And that's their remaining taint that needs to be cleared away. For those who do not yet even feel escaped from sensuality, or who don't yet have access to a really strong, solid, well-developed samadhi practice where they can get into that state and withdraw the mind from the aches and pains of or the distraction of the five senses. I have this idea that thinking and reflecting about the danger in our being concerned about a position or a status is a way of preparing the mind to not be looking for that kind of a solution. To be able to let it go, to not be clinging to anything by way of an identification. We have enough time for me to review a little bit more about this wrong idea about the self, which is how this taint of becoming, this desire for heavenly existence is arising. Just as I'm speaking to you today, and the conversation that we're having is a way that the Dhamma, which is the most meaningful, is arising out of that conversation, out of that dialogue. Just the same way the Buddha was in dialogue with the other spiritual seekers of his own time. And the way that the Dhamma is phrased and expressed in the teachings that come down to us is meaningful in the context of that dialogue with the other schools. I'll mention four of them. One is in the early Upanishads. The Atman, that's the Sanskrit word, the same thing as Atta, is thought of as a true self. They say Atman is Brahman. So by getting in touch with the true self, one can transcend the personal ego and experience something timeless, blissful, and consciously aware. So the question that Ren had earlier about consciousness, so that Upanishadic awareness of in the true self is what it's pointing to. So then there's an idea of a release, a higher kind of consciousness, which has got calmness and serenity. It's very not like ordinary empirical consciousness. Empirical consciousness has got a duality. Like if I'm aware of the camera, then the camera is there and I'm here. And so then there's like this duality with this object, then there's a subject. So the subject and the object, the subject, which is me, is like being co-created each time that I become aware of an object. And so then myself is like at the middle of everything. There's many, many different sequences of objects that come along through my experience, but then in the middle of all of it is this subjectivity. Okay, so then the other schools have this idea that this subjectivity, that this consciousness can exist by itself without any object. So this is like a pure consciousness. It's not being conscious of anything. So you would take, here I am in the village with all the traffic and the people, and I take away the village and go to the forest so there's no traffic and no people. And then in the forest, there's a lot of trees and bushes, and I take away the trees and bushes, and then I'm just like with the body, the form, feeling, and the aspects of mentality. And then I take away the body, I take away the feeling, I take away the perceptions, I take away the volitional formations. And so every possible aspect of experience that could be objectified, you kind of like take that away, take it away, take it away, until it comes like there's nothing left and there's just pure consciousness, so they say. This pure self, I mentioned before about being less than, having a self which is dirty, having a self which is sinful. This was a big problem in ancient times, like why suffering happens and why beings are like destined to suffer, because their essential nature is like soiled or imperfect. So this Upanishad idea of the true self is something that is not touched by any deeds. So whatever happens with good deeds and bad deeds and merits and demerits and skillful and unskillful, it doesn't ever touch the true self. The true self is just a pure observer that's never involved, never engaged. And it's like in so many ways similar, like the feeling tone of it, like what it's like to be doing this kind of meditation and what it's like to be practicing Samadhi. It's like A, B, C, D, E. It's actually, you're experiencing the same thing, but then the concept that you lay on top of it is different. And because of laying a different concept on it is how you get to a different result. The Buddha said, you realize this is also impermanent. It's also unconditioned. This is not the final refuge because of its impermanence and conditioned nature. I can't cling to that. So I'm disenchanted with that. Turning away from that, I turn towards Nibbana. Now, when people misunderstood that, they had a different danger, which was falling into a materialistic school. which, if you read those suttas in translation, you might see in some suttas talking about the view of annihilationist or nihilism, which is saying there's nothing happening after the end of this lifespan. Therefore, there's no need to be virtuous because it doesn't matter. That's like a form of nihilism. But that's a sort of a slight misrepresentation of this materialist school. It's called Charvakas. And they felt that the ordinary self, like the person in the mirror, arises when a being is born. And it's not a real essential thing, but it's something that is arising from the material base of a living body. It's very similar to modern science. Like, brain scientists, they're really doing a lot of effort to prove that the mind and consciousness is just an epiphenomenon of all the electric signals happening in this mass of circuits that's happening in a physical material brain. So, actually modern time is, we are basically materialists. So consciousness is arising from this material basis. Our psychic life is a byproduct of these great material elements. At the end of the life, all of the material elements go back to their source. The water element goes back to water, the fire element goes back to fire, and so on. And then that life is over. This view is singled out in several suttas. Like, there's many different kinds of wrong view. There's 42 wrong views given in one of the long suttas. And I wonder, why is it that in some of the other suttas, the Buddha just picked out this one wrong view that was mentioned as like the important wrong view to overcome? I'm going to give, this is an alternative translation that explains it. These are the people who don't believe in the other world. They think that this world is all we've got. There's nothing given, donated, and offered for the departed. There's no ripening and fruit of good and bad acts after death. There's no life after death. One's mother and father will no longer exist. There are no non-physical beings. There are no attained and practiced renunciates and Brahmins who say there is a life after death, having witnessed it so for themselves with special powers. That is exactly scientific materialism. And we may recall from yesterday, I mentioned that the Buddha realized three knowledges. First, the knowledge of his own previous lifetimes. Second, the knowledge about how beings are reborn according to their karma. And the third was the knowledge of the destruction of the asavas. So the Buddha and many persons with realization can have direct knowledge about rebirth. Many other people do not have direct knowledge about rebirth. You may take it on faith because you trust the Buddha, because everything else he said was so helpful and so beneficial, and because holding this framework makes life meaningful and gives a support for the sort of the psychology of virtue. Or even if you are agnostic or skeptical about the other world or about heaven and hell and life after death, if you would don't get up on your soapbox and start waving a placard about it, but instead say, well, even if it's not true, nevertheless, by practicing like this, I can come to the end of dukkha in this very lifetime. Another school was the school of Jainism. And they had the idea that like the self or the soul, I guess jiva is the soul, gets to be dusty because of the evil, unwholesome acts that have been done in the past. They felt that it would be possible to undertake non-action, not doing anything. And so making extreme steps to not even like wearing a mask because you don't want to inadvertently inhale an insect, and sweeping the pathway in front of you because you don't want to step on an insect, standing for a long time. So they had this idea that one could abstain from doing any more unskillful deeds that would bring retribution in the future lifetime. And they also had the idea that one can purify oneself, that the past evil karma that you did can be purified by undertaking self-mortification, such as standing on one leg in the hot sun for the rest of your life until you die of starvation. So the Buddha also rejected that school, and as part of his understanding of the middle way. And it's like karmic cause and effect is a trap when you're caught in it, when you have got the wrong view about the self. But when you escape from that wrong view and come to wisdom, then you can get out of that trap. Then the last school I'll mention is called Ajivakas, which is, they combined a kind of like a karmic materialism with an idea about evolution. They believe that naturally existence follows its own pattern and goes on and on and on according to a long pattern over eons that can neither be lessened nor increased. Just as a ball of thread, when it's thrown, unwinds itself to its full length, so the fool and the wise alike will take their course and eventually come to the end of pain. Now, the Ajivakas did not think that they could destroy their bad karma by ascetic practices or self-mortification, but they did believe that one could avoid accumulating new bad karma. And so they were virtuous. In fact, even the materialists were virtuous. So I think Buddhism is a little bit unfair towards the other schools in accusing them of being inherently amoral. But nevertheless, these are all, especially the schools that have this, the Upanishad school that has this idea that there's this eternal self, this pure consciousness, which is apart from all the troubles of this world. And then to get out of the trouble of this world, if you just can connect to that, find that, and go there, that's your way out. And the Buddha just said, I tried it. It's not the way out. So don't hold that concept, because that concept is going to become like a blinder that's going to prevent you from getting the benefit that you can get from practicing meditation and experiencing these sublime states. So these are all, in some of the teachings, they mention 4 asavas, and some they mention 3. So the 3 were sensuality, Khīnāsava, existence or becoming, that's bhavasava, and ignorance, Jivasava, Avidyasava. Then the fourth one is the taint of views, which is a sort of like a subdivision of the Bhavasava. And that's the reason. So what I've done now is I've explained to you the taint of views, but that's a little bit like commentarial, and it's maybe I think easier, more clear, more direct, more practical. Just to think, if you want a guide for practice, to think about the three, and the three of them are working together in a synergy. So the ignorance, you can't have the other two without having ignorance. You need the ignorance to support the other two. And then the desire for a position, a status, a place, an existence, something going out that's a standpoint that you can get there. And once you've landed, then your troubles are over. You've got to lose that, because that's both something that's a block that will prevent you from realizing your full awakening, and also it's the cause of so much pain and misery, evil, cruelty in this world from people who are so smug and so satisfied and so oblivious to themselves that they would stand on their position or their status and think that that's some kind of a solution to something. So this is what I have to tell you as far as my Dhamma for today. And I would like to invite you to give me some feedback. If you were able to make out what I'm talking about as this Bhavasava, the intoxication of existence, or the taint of becoming, or any other questions you might have. Including questions and comments from here. Okay, Maureen. Unmute.
I realize that you probably classify me as the nihilist, but really I do think something. I think that what survives is the karma. The karma that every individual is creating throughout their lifetime by their choices becomes the karma that's in their family, in their local community, in their society, whatever. And it's the karma that we all contribute to as in our human, social, animal sort of way we've evolved. And that, there's that one, the 5 contemplations. The last contemplation is, I am owner of my karma. I am heir to my karma. I am born of my karma. I am related to my karma. I abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, of that I will be the heir. And to me, that's what carries on after we've died.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes me think that I have to do the best I can while I'm alive as my contribution to the wider humanity of my existence. I don't know whether that makes sense, but there's so much that you said is, it's like food for thinking about, and I do appreciate these conversations. Thank you.
Maureen, you could have summarized a talk that I gave a few days ago. It's on the website about causation. And exactly that we, as far as genetics, culture, and the impact we have on the material world, all of the choices that we make, we're making, millions of choices, and those do flow forward and experienced by many. So we have this interrelatedness, this interconnection with all beings. You see this in Buddhism, where they speak about, through countless previous lifetimes, any person, insect, or animal that you meet could at one time or another have been your mother or your father. And so through this connectivity of causation, we have this interrelationship, so that we're not just in a selfish way thinking about, my particular bundle of aggregates that makes up, my own experience, and how it flows onwards. The Buddha was careful not to deny rebirth, but still to point out in a certain way the whole process. It's not a personal process, and it's not a material process of some entity, whether it's an ideal entity or like a mental entity or a spiritual entity or a physical entity that's going forward from life to life as a little atom or a nugget of self that's moving along and taking up occupancy in various bodies over time. He said that's definitely not it. So I feel without taking it's not necessary to take a stance saying, there is no rebirth or something like that, but just simply to say that there is all this other causation. So the choices that were made by millions of people determines the circumstance into which I was born, including the decision made by mom and dad. And then the things that I do also will flow outwards. I'm going to go on to Damon.
Thank you, Ayya. You mentioned smugness of some people. Thank you, and I agree. On the other hand, it seems like there's this whole industry lately of the happiness industry. And even meditation instructors in California are putting in their bio that I can make you, I did a TED talk about how to be 10% happier and so forth. And so that anecdote about Ajahn Chah with the protester in front, maybe she's right. I wonder whether I also should take that humble attitude, or we should, as Buddhists, and that, you know what, if all these people out there think that they're happy, maybe they're right. Who are we to define happiness for them? Isn't it defined subjectively by each individual? So, to say something like, well, other people are just deluded about being happy, I feel like that also smells of smugness.
Thank you. It's certainly true that as Buddhism traveled around the world and was integrated into the cultures and thought systems, ways of thinking of different peoples around the world, then there's a kind of a interpenetration. And we know, for example, the Dalai Lama said he doesn't want to cause people around the world to become Buddhists. He wants them to become kind to be better to pick up whatever elements that are in the Dhamma that will contribute to the alleviation of suffering in the world. And so having people who are packaging something commercial that can make you 10% happier, well, that's the American way. So no need to be troubled by that. There was another part of your question about if people think they're happy, why not just take it? Yes, they are happy if they think they're happy. So, there's I think I may get to this tomorrow morning. There's a part about how the asavas work in terms of ethics. One ethical idea, it's a utilitarianism. That's the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. And it's sort of like can acknowledge any kind of happiness. If you think it's happy, it's happy. So if you've got a world in which people are allowed to take a drink, if that's what pleases them, they can go to the movies if that makes them happy. They can ride a roller coaster. They can just marry who they like, love who they like, express their personality as they like, and if those things make them happy, then that's good. Now, Buddhism was a bit more insightful about that in terms of pointing out what's called the hedonic treadmill, where a person can experience happiness and pain in a relationship to each other, and so you don't really have the happiness without the pain, and the pain gets away from the happiness, and it sort of like falls back into pain afterwards. So then that kind of happiness is not what the Buddha recommended. He was searching for something else. If you take an ethic, this is going to preview of tomorrow. If you take an ethic that says whatever is contributing towards reducing the corruptions around sensual pleasure, longing for rebirth in heaven, and ignorance, that's sort of like the guideline or the marker for what's skillful and what's not skillful. But I'll come to that later. Thank you for your comment. I'm going to call on Ren.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much for this talk. It feels like a fresh new world for me, because I didn't understand it that way. I think I've come to an understanding previously that this subjective self without objective, like without any objects, is like going back to the source. That's the source, which is the ultimate thing. That was my understanding of what the ultimate thing is. Not only just for Buddhism, I thought it was just Taoism, Christianity. Everything was just trying to let us see what the source is, and the source is the ultimate goal. And now today it's like, whoa, no, that's not true for Buddhism. And it was the first time ever I'm able to see it so clearly from your explanation. So I really, really appreciate that. I don't know where I could go from there, but I want only reality. I want only the truth.
Yeah.
So it's wow. Yeah, and I only get bits and pieces about what the Buddha's idea of what the ultimate, whatever, whether that's the ultimate or whatever the reality is. I don't quite get it yet, but yeah, it's a really big departure from what I thought it was.
Yeah, great. I'm so glad to hear you say that. Sadhu, sadhu, thank you. And, we've been having this conversation over a period of weeks, and I'm really glad if a little bit seems to make sense. And it's like, I don't think we can go like directly like this is the answer, but then we have to say, just practice like this. mainly let go. Just keep letting go, let go, let go, let go. And then allow that ultimate, the source, that experience, what you're talking about, allow it to emerge without any false concepts wrapped around it.
Right.
I want to call on Karuna, who's in the room, and then we've got plenty of time, so everybody will have a chance to make a comment or ask a question. You need to come up and speak to the microphone.
Thank you. So 2 questions. One was you were talking about the 3 wrong views or the 4 wrong views, but the third one was about very close to Buddhism. You go through all the different steps of meditation, but at the end, maybe Buddhism has a different end result. Maybe say more about that. And then the second question was the wrong view of being better, inferior. The third one was being equal and how that was a wrong view. So could you clarify the third one, how being equal is a wrong view? So those 2 questions.
I'll speak to the second part of Karuna's question first. If a person has an equality complex, then they wouldn't be able to recognize and condemn what's like skillful and unskillful, and say like all the different values or ideas that people have, they're all just different opinions and we put them all on the same plane. Yeah, but the Buddha did recognize there is that which is unskillful, that which is skillful. Another aspect in traditional culture, there's a strong value placed on respect. Honoring and venerating that which is worthy of respect is a very important part of our practice. And the Buddha taught that to be a Brahmin, to be one who's deserving of respect, is not because of one's birth, but instead it's because of one's purity of one's life and of one's practice and of one's realization. So then, by not having an equality complex or an obsession with equality, one is able to give the right kind of veneration and appreciation for those who have realized the good to which we could aspire. And by having that admiration, we can go to it. As far as explaining the Buddha's view in contradistinction to the other 4 views that I outlined the Upanishad view, the Charvaka view, which is materialist, the Jain view, which is that one can clear up your evil karma by doing self-mortification and not doing any new karmas. And then the Ajivaka view, which is that there's a natural evolution and you can't do anything about it, just wait, and it unrolls of its own course. The Buddhist view is dukkha samudaya, dukkha nirodha gamini patipada. So there is dukkha, there is a cause for the arising of dukkha. There is the cessation of dukkha when that cause has been abandoned. And there is a path which leads to the cessation of dukkha. I'm going to call on Venerable Dhammadeva. So nice to see you. Let's see, you seem to be muted. It doesn't say muted, but there's something wrong with your microphone.
If I get very close, then maybe you can hear me. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay, yes.
Could you make it even a little louder?
I could, but I would have to get up and find my mics and all that stuff. So let me get very, very close.
Okay, that's good.
But maybe you can hear me better. So I wanted to say I appreciated quite the details that you offered. And in your talk, one thing that came to mind for me was the conversation between Venerable Anuruddha and Venerable Moggallana. And Venerable Anuruddha says, oh, you know, among many things he says, and my body is calm. So I take that to be somewhat of an implication that he feels he has moved beyond sense desire. And then he talks about his divine eye, you know, I have the divine eye and I can see this and that and the other thing. And he's obviously identified with that, right? And the Venerable Moggallana says to him, and this relates to the part of your talk, I believe, where you were saying that if you believe, even if you are able to attain these very beautiful, subtle meditative states, but you are somehow believing that that is an eternal form or something that will lead you to an eternal form, or that you somehow have attached to that, then you won't actually be able to obtain the insight that comes from that, right? If I understood correctly. And so Venerable Moggallana, as you know, in the sutta says to him, oh, you know, that is your arrogance, that attachment that you have to your divine eye. And the prompt that he gives him is turn toward the deathless, see the deathless, yeah? And I understood that prompt to mean something like not only to relinquish his arrogance and his attachment, but also that by relinquishing his attachment or his arrogance around that, his identification with that he would be able to see the cessation of consciousness. And so my question to you, Venerable Ayya, is what do you think about that? That Venerable Ayya is repetitive, I'm sorry. Venerable is, what do you think that prompt is? Turn toward the deathless.
So this language about the deathless is arising out of this dialogue with the other traditions. So the other traditions associate the deathless with an eternal, unchanging existence. And the Buddha is associating the deathless with giving up on existence. That which is like death is sort of like a marker of time. And time is something that is marked by like cause and effect, like this leads to that, leads to that, leads to that, leads to that. And then that's how we have time. Life and death and life and death and life and death. It keeps going around. That's how we get time. We get up to eons and kalpas. And so then if we get out of causation and this leads to that, this leads to that, we go beyond that because of having let go or relinquish this craving for existence, then that's the way to go into the timeless. That would be my explanation, but it's very conceptual when we say it like that. Unfortunately, we have to use words to try to clarify these things, but I urge everybody not to get hung up in it like a conceptual philosophical debate or something like that, but just consider these words to be suggestive of a sort of a direction of practice. So don't cling to existence. Supatra, did you have a hand up?
Yes, I did. I do. Yes. So I would like to perhaps respond just a little bit to Damon's very I would say, very common questions, about if people have happiness, right? They say they have happiness, and different leaders, teachers, guru, even yoga teachers say, here is, I can make you happy, or TED Talk, and people have happiness. So what's wrong with that, right? That why it's very quite profound that you say, well, who are we to say, well, that's not real happiness? But I don't think Buddha is against happiness. That's why he's talking about like heaven realm. Heaven realm is full of this happiness, except if that happiness is hurtful or harmful to others or to self, right? So one of the things about happiness in general is, in a lot of school of thought, they emphasize only happiness, but didn't emphasize where does it lead to, whether it's harmful to self or others or not. They don't talk about that. So a lot of people become happy in the beginning. They are very good and nice. And then after a while, they start doing harmful things to themselves or others, but they didn't even think about that because that's not in the formula, right? But secondly, I think that what Buddha is pointing to is only that happiness, whatever we think we define as happiness, are not sustainable, and that eventually it will end. That's all he keeps saying that a lot about impermanence, right? That's all he's saying, especially that, well, if you want to just get out of this cycle altogether, this is the way I found, right? And this all leads to this whole Buddhism that he taught, and he said that he discovered this way by himself, right? And that is basically leaving this whole cycle together. We're not talking about happiness, unhappiness. We're going to go cut through that into leaving the cycle of we call it the wheel, right? And so there comes all this path and the Eightfold Path. So it's not like condemning if we as human beings want to have happiness, or some people just say, well, I just want to go to heaven in the next realm. So there's going to even more happiness. Okay? So that's not condemnable as long as it's not creating more negative or bad karma by hurting senses. So I don't think it's a matter of condemning other happiness, but of only saying, well, how far does this go, right? It's eventually your happiness fall, you start to feel it's stale and no longer that novel, and suddenly it feels empty, right? So that's why a lot of rich and famous people kill themselves, because they are at the apex of happiness and then they feel lost and empty, right? So that's what Buddha is pointing to, is that, really, if you want to follow his path, you can get out of this cycle altogether. I think I just want to respond to that, so that they, you don't think that like we are condemning other people that have other kind of happiness. Yes.
Thank you. That's a really great comment and a great clarification. I don't think I need to add to what you said. Let us take a five-minute break from now and come back here at 15 minutes after the hour, and then we can sit together in meditation.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Maureen, you've got a hand up? Unmute yourself.
Yes. I think that we attach sukha and dukkha are just the flip side of the same coin, in that too much clinging to either one is harmful. And then also permanence and impermanence. There's something very optimistic about impermanence, because you can make things better if it's impermanent by your choice. You can make a choice. And so there are these things that tend to get, everybody's into like sukha good, dukkha bad, and impermanence is negative and permanence is security. But no, there are good things about impermanence and there are bad things about sukha if you get too clinging to it. That's all I wanted to say.
In our culture here in the United States, it's in our either the Declaration of Independence or the preamble to the Constitution that mentions life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as being the inalienable right for each person. And so then this is got these, it's funny how a few words on a piece of paper can have an impact on an entire culture over a period of centuries, but they do. And understanding the characteristic of a quote, quote, a true happiness or a happiness which has got the healthy, wholesome, beneficial aspect of not harming to oneself, not harming to others, not creating impediment to our future growth and so on, is a wonderful field of study. You could say even that entire departments in college are dedicated to that question, that investigation, like literature, psychology, medicine, history, social science, and political science, and educational theory. All of those things are in some way they're concerned, aren't they, about happiness and how to get happiness. Well, the Buddha was concerned about the end of dukkha, which is kind of like the same, it's a sort of in the same ballpark, the same pursuit, the same investigation. But Subhadra had there's something that was in her comment that I think we should remember. It's like, I have some young relatives, the youngest relatives I know who are little babies and small children, my nieces and nephews, and they're so darling. They're just so cute and so lovable. And just thinking about them causes me to feel happy because they're dear and delightful. Now, if I'm able to know it's all impermanent, practice non-clinging, and to be very sensitive about not having any harmful side effects, then I can have that happiness. That things which are lovable, that's their nature. It's okay to enjoy them. And if your neighbor wins the lottery or gets a good job, you don't have to have a sour face and say, "Oh, it's all impermanent. It's you're going to suffer later." You don't have to just say, "Well, sadhu, sadhu, congratulations, you got something nice," and just let happiness be happiness. We've got a different endeavor in what we're seeking, but as Subhadra said, all beings have the desire for happiness. When one sees this with the eye of wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. So just acknowledging that as a reality, it's a good thing. Now, I do want to give a little break and then come back for meditation. Now, I'm inviting everyone to come back at 20 minutes after the hour. Just take a 5-minute break to get up and stretch the body. Coming to an upright and balanced posture. Letting go of the excitement of the words and voices that we just had. Just coming to the present moment. Aware of the surrounding space, the room where we are, the size and shape of that room, or if we're outside, the shape of the outside world underneath the sky. Aware of the ambient sounds, smells, sights, whatever can come into our senses. Aware of the touching sensation on the body, the seat pressing on the cushion, however the legs are arranged, touching the floor, touching the body, the hands touching. The clothing touching the body. The temperature of the air touching the skin. And the sensations coming from within the body. The vibrations. The little itching and twitching in the body. The heart beating. The warmth in the belly. Fully alive to every sensation. through the five senses. A humming and buzzing village of sensations, touching your own self. Your own awareness. And among all those sensations, the sensation of breath. Putting awareness just at the rim of the nose, of the nostrils, where the breath comes and goes. Putting that in front. All the other sensations fade back a bit. They're more dim when the spotlight of awareness is focused narrowly just on the breath at the rim of the nostrils. See for how long awareness can rest there in that small spot. And as something else comes into awareness, notice it. And when you can, come back to the breath. And if the mind drifts away, come back. If the breath becomes very subtle, just keep watching the spot where the breath was before. Even if there's not a strong sensation there, keep awareness on that one spot. aiming to keep the practice in the direction of Samadhi. Turn awareness to the breath throughout this afternoon and tonight. Every time you think of it, notice the breath. And then when you're sitting or walking, keep on noticing the breath. That will help to move the meditation to be a little bit more concentrated. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.